Hello and welcome from the Oklahoma Insurance Department. My name is Rachel Fan and I work in the Communications Division here at OID. Thank you for joining us for our Consumer Connection webinar series. Before we get started, I wanted to share a little bit about what the Oklahoma Insurance Department, or OID, does. OID is a state agency, and we are responsible for regulating the insurance market and enforcing the insurance-related laws of the state. We have an entire team devoted to protecting consumers by providing them with accurate information and timely assistance. We can also deal with your insurance company if you can't reach an agreement regarding a claim. If you would like to reach out to us for help, or if you have any questions, you can call us toll-free at 1-800-522-0071, and you can also visit our website at oid.ok.gov. Now I'd like to introduce today's guest, Kayla Blount. Kayla is the principal advisor at 317 Insurance Advisors. She began her insurance journey at Liberty Mutual, achieving top national rankings and earning awards through hard work and dedication. In July of 2019, she took a bold step, becoming the owner of 317 Insurance Advisors, an independent agency. As a believer in personalized solutions, Kayla and her team at 317 Insurance Advisors tailor coverage to each client's unique needs, emphasizing quality at competitive premiums. Kayla, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you, Rachel.
So Kayla, I'd like to talk to you today about how homeowners insurance rates have changed recently and the factors that have contributed to that increase in Oklahoma specifically.
Yes, that is definitely a hot topic with Oklahomans right now. And there's good and bad news. The bad news is it is affecting pretty much everyone in Oklahoma across the board. The good news is we're not the only state. This is actually happening nationwide with most insurance providers. So even though it's a pain that we feel, there's other states that are feeling this as well. So one of the things you asked me to talk about was the things that contribute to some of the increases. And so we'll go into some detail right here. The first thing that people don't realize is insurance is not immediate. We live in a society where if we push a button, we want something immediately, we want it delivered, we want it here and now. And Absolutely. Insurance is one of those things where it actually takes data that they're forecasting a little bit. And then a lot of the things that affect us are actually past and historical events. So they're going back and collecting data. And so the rate increases that we are seeing now actually began to be set in motion about 2 or 3 years ago. And if you think about it,
I did not realize there was such a lag and delay in those insurance rates.
Yeah, and most consumers don't. So it's really important to understand what goes into the pricing and what accumulates to the premium of homeowners insurance. So if you think about it, we've had a couple of things that led up to this. So we all look back on 2020. We want to try to block that year out. But
Absolutely.
We had a pandemic. Well, when's the last time we had a pandemic? Because what insurance companies do is they go back and look at historical data. Well, during the pandemic, there's no real historical data to go see and say, okay, What happened the last time we were in a pandemic? There's no historical data for that. So we were in a little bit of uncharted waters there. But then you think of what happened here in Oklahoma, and we had historical temperature changes. I know where I live, just a little bit east of Oklahoma City, we had over 10 days where we were over or under minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit. If you think about it, that's a lot for your home. And if you fast forward about 7 or 8 months, we were 110 degrees. So that's a lot for your home to take. So you have to look at some of the things that led to. So we had some historic losses during that cold spell of pipes bursting, people having severe water damage in your home. So then you go to a few months later, we had pretty significant storms. We had a couple of large hailstorms in the South Metro. Then we had some flooding. So you add that on top of that. Then you go a couple more months. And then in the month of October, we had a pretty significant windstorm. Yeah. So if you think about it, it's hard to explain this to folks in Oklahoma, but the carriers have to make sure that they are pricing the premium correctly. we really have to cover all losses except for volcanoes. And
So
I say that
pretty
kind of
much every
jokingly.
natural disaster that exists, we're covering that.
Yes. And so you think, why are homeowners rates so expensive? Well, look at the vast range of
Right.
losses that the carrier has to potentially cover. So you've got that wide variety of losses. Well, if you think about it, in 2020, we had historic losses across the board in Oklahoma, but in some of the surrounding states too. And then we're slowly coming out of COVID and we've got 2021, and we almost have a repeat of the exact same pattern. So you go to 2022 and the insurance carriers are looking at what they've got forecasted going forward. And then they look at the historical data of what's happened the past 2 years. And it was a big wake up because there was so much money paid out in claims. You find these insurance carriers paying out billions, and that's with a B, billions of dollars more than they took in premium. So in order to sustain as a business, you have to think, okay, if I'm losing money on the money that I'm bringing in, you can't sustain a business that way.
No.
So they have to go and make changes in their premium. And it seems very drastic now because there's such a change in premium, because we're seeing in between the different carriers anywhere from 30 to 50 to sometimes even more than a 50% rate increase.
Wow.
However, if you go back and look over the last 3 years, it took a little bit to get where we are right now.
And that makes sense when you think about all of that stuff that's contributing to it. But it is really easy to forget that all of that happened and just focus on, well, what are we doing today? What happened this month? And why is it so drastic?
Well, then we go to our next line item and we talk about these historic losses. Well, we go to then you have to repair and replace these things that have happened. Well, let's go back to 2020, and we had a huge ordeal when it came to getting materials. So as the economy works, the pricing on things are based on availability and supply. Well, if the supply is low and the availability is hard to find, but yet it's in high demand, the cost rises exponentially. So not only do you have more events that the insurance companies are having to pay for, the costs are so much more to get the materials, the labor, the time constraints. And so that factors into the billions of dollars that were paid out. So that played a role in it too. And then when you go back and look at that, so some carriers are nationwide. Some some carriers are more regional based carriers. Well, the smaller carriers are actually able to pivot a little bit faster. So you saw more moves from the regional carriers first. And what they did is some of them actually decided to pull out of some states. Well, when you look at that and look at being able to have a wide variety of options, when carriers start pulling out of states, your options go down. Well, what happens there is when your options go down, the existing carriers that are in that state realize that, okay, if these folks have nowhere to go, then they're now going to fall onto us.
Supply and demand.
So when you're taking more risk on as a carrier, you have to price for that, because the more risk that you take on, the more possibility there are for claims. So you have to price for that. So not only are you having the price adjustment for the historical losses, but now some of these carriers are picking up additional risk. So they've got to price that into their premium as well. And then the last thing that I want to touch on this, we've already touched on inflation a little bit, but one thing, good or bad, everybody's got an opinion on this, but our society now seems to thrive on litigation. Yep. And what we are seeing lately is things that were litigated in the past, things that are litigated now are getting a much substantial, higher, I don't know if you call it a reward or a settlement, and that's having an impact too. So say historical data says in a claim or an accident of this nature, we've paid out X amount of dollars. Well, now if that same claim or loss, you're paying out a higher amount of dollars, well, that has to be factored in too. The money has to come from somewhere. So they have to adjust the premiums to make sure that they are taking in enough money to sustain and make sure that they can pay out on those losses.
Yeah, that all makes perfect sense. And it is crazy how many of these factors go into determining these rates. We've touched on this a little bit already, but I really wanted to dive in and see, are these increases region specific, or, are they happening everywhere? Talk to us a little bit more about the rate variations.
So we did talk about that there were price increases nationwide, but we are affected a little bit more in our region just because what we talked about earlier, just the wide and the diverse range of risks that we have to insure for. And we have to make sure that we do not put ourselves in Oklahoma in the same position as some of the other states across the nation.
Right.
So I'm sure everyone has seen the news, and we've got some states. I say that we compete with them in the pain point index, and the pain point index is how much we pay out for things. And right now,
you don't want to be number one on that contest.
We do not want to be number one on that. So some states that are struggling right now, so we look at the coastal states, if you look at Florida, and if you look at California, there have been so many carriers that have pulled out of those regions just because the risk and the amount of claims that they have paid out, that the insurance offering has gone down to some places to 2 carriers. So if you think about this, even though the rates are high, do we want to put ourselves in a position where we have 2 options, which if you think about it, the option is high and higher, or do we want to be in a position where we at least have 10, 20, 30 options to choose from? So even though it may be more expensive, the more carriers that we are able to have do business in the state, the more competitive the rates actually are.
That makes a lot of sense. And, thankfully, Oklahoma hasn't hit the hurricanes yet. We've got all the other natural disasters, but we'll let the coastal states keep those.
Yes, well, and we tease our clients about that. And I'm fortunate enough that I have a lot of military clients, and so they go all around the nation. Oh, yeah. And when they get to Oklahoma, they're thrilled on the amount of home that they can buy. And then they get to the insurance, they're like, "Are you kidding me?" Yep. And it's like, well, we do truly have to insure for pretty much every risk except for volcanoes. And we joke about hurricanes because they're like, well, what about hurricanes? We've actually in Oklahoma had some pretty significant flooding due to remnants of hurricanes that have come up. So we can thank our friends from Texas for that.
So we do get a little bit. Oh, that's too funny. Well, now that we've kind of discussed more why this is happening and what is causing it, are there ways that homeowners can better understand their insurance coverage and kind of some steps to potentially mitigate the impact of these increases?
Yes, there absolutely is. And if you hang around me for more than 5 minutes, you will hear this word come out of my mouth: steward or stewardship. It is so important to be a good steward of your home. For most of us, our home is the biggest financial investment we will ever make. So we want to make sure that we are proactive in protecting that investment. So I encourage clients to walk their house monthly, walk your house inside, walk your house outside, especially after a large storm that has come through. I promise you there are no better dollars spent than proactive dollars. And I have a really good example of this. My husband and I built a new home a few years ago, and we changed the plans of how we were going to have our back porch. Well, nobody caught it, but the way that we put our gutters, the gutter on the back, instead of shooting out into the yard, actually stopped right at the foundation.
Oh, no.
Well, we had been in the property about 18 months, and we noticed a little crack coming up. I thought, oh my gosh, that is too early to be settling. And so we actually contacted a foundation specialist. And he said, "Ma'am, I'm really glad that you called me." He said, "This is going to be an easy fix. The way that the water is coming down, it is washing it out and causing it to be unstable right there, which is why you're seeing a crack." He said, "If you will just have the downspout buried, shot out into the yard," he said, "it'll cost you a couple $100. You'll never have to talk to me again." So at the end of the conversation, way to spend
a couple $100 now instead of thousands later.
And that's just it. So when we were walking out to his truck, my husband said, "Just out of curiosity, if we hadn't called you till a few years from now, what do you think that would have cost?" And he said, "Well," because it was on the corner of the house, he goes, "Well, you're probably looking at anywhere from 3 to maybe 6 piers." Well, if you think about it, piers are anywhere from $800 to $1,000 a piece.
Oh my
I was so thankful to write that couple $100 check, because if I'd had to write a 5 to $7,000 check later. I mean, think about it. I'm telling you, the best dollars you will ever spend on your property is the pro maintenance and active steward of your home.
No, that makes perfect sense. And it's amazing how such a little simple action can save you so much money down the road.
Yes, proactive maintenance. Another thing that you can do is talk to your agent about bundling as many policies as you can together. The more policies that you have with a carrier, generally the more discounts that you will receive. Another thing that we can look at, and sometimes this is a hard conversation to have, but it's really important, especially where our industry is right now, just the volatility of rates, are the deductibles. Now, if you want to see the biggest change in premium of your home, we talk about deductibles. What the deductible is that is what the homeowner's financial responsibility is when there's a claim filed. So the higher the deductible, the more financial responsibility goes on the homeowner. So that's going to lessen the premium. So the higher that your deductibles are on your homeowner's policy, the more it's going to have an impact on your premium. And one thing in Oklahoma that sets us apart from some of our other states is we have percentage deductibles. Okay. And generally, any time that you see a percentage on your policy, it's based on the amount of the dwelling. So we're going to do simple math here. So say you have a $200,000 home and you see a 1% deductible. In the event of a loss, your deductible will be $2,000 because it's 1% of that 2,000. So in Oklahoma, again, talking about the volatility of the rates, we have had some carriers that they want to stay in the state, but they do want to stay profitable. So they're able to maintain staying in the state, being able to maintain that financial stability. And so what they're doing is they're actually increasing the deductibles. So sometimes now you'll see a 2% deductible or 3% deductible. Just know that to calculate what you're going to be responsible to pay out in the event of a claim is that whatever that percentage is, you factor it off of your dwelling coverage, which would be coverage A on your policy.
That makes a lot of sense.
And then the last thing that we encourage folks to do is do an annual review of your policy. Because as you grow older, I wish some of us grew younger, but as we grow older, you have life circumstances that change. You may need additional coverage. You may need less coverage. You may need more coverage. The best thing to do is just schedule that annual review with your agent so you can walk through the coverages that you currently have and then the coverages that you may need or may be able to take off of the policy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, just like, your health insurance coverage might change from year 1 to year 10. Absolutely. It would be the same for your homeowner's policy. So that makes a lot of sense. Well, perfect. So how can Oklahomans ensure that they're getting the best value? It's all about that at the end of the day. And so what are some tips for determining that best value coverage for Oklahomans?
Well, I'm going to answer this a couple of different ways because I don't want to leave our captive agents out because we have a couple of different ways that you can get insurance. I was a captive agent one time, but what a captive agent is someone who just works for a specific carrier, whereas an independent agent is someone that contracts with multiple different carriers. So if you do have insurance with a captive agent, I do encourage you to get a couple of different quotes from a couple of different companies. Or if you're with an independent agent, they can provide multiple quotes from multiple different companies. So I do encourage you to do your research to either do the quoting request by yourself or get with an independent agent and have them do that work for you. Always have a consultative approach. Insurance is not an order taking. You check a few boxes, you put a few things down, then you go about your way. Insurance is actually pretty complex. So you want to make sure that you're having a consultative conversation with your agents. So one, they know what's important to you, but two, once you have that conversation, they may ask you questions that trigger additional questions, and you may need additional coverage that is not offered on a standard homeowner's policy. So make sure you're having that consultative conversation with your agents. Another thing that you can do, and it has been unfortunate in Oklahoma and some of our surrounding states, but some of our regional carriers haven't made it. They've actually gone into receivership. And that is extremely hard for not only the agent, the agency, the carrier itself, but it's really hard on the consumers, because what that means is the company has actually gone insolvent, and they're no longer able to provide the financials necessary to pay out claims.
Oh,
and so
you don't want that.
and you don't. That is so scary. So do your research on the companies. Make sure you're asking your agent, how long have they been in business, especially if you've never heard of the carrier before. Are they financially stable? What is their BBB rating? Look them up on the internet. The hardship is whenever one of these companies do go into receivership, it puts a big burden on everyone, because you have a hard and fast stop date of when you need to get coverage placed somewhere else. So make sure you know the strength of the company that you're going with. Again, we touched on this earlier. Look at your deductible options. So homeowners insurance is not meant to be a maintenance policy, which means your little bitty bumps and bruises claims, those are better for you, the consumer, if you pay those out of pockets. Insurance is truly meant for the large catastrophic losses, which that means is if this loss is going to financially devastate you, that's why you have the insurance. But if it's a loss that is one of those things where it's going to sting a little bit, it's a good idea to have that conversation with the agent, because in the long run, you may end up paying more in premiums because of some of the discounts that you've lost than if you would have just paid that initial loss out yourself. And then the last thing to talk about is the type of coverage, because depending on the type of home that you have and the need that you have and your financial stability as a consumer, you may not need the same coverage as other folks. So there's two different types of insurance on your homeowner's insurance. There's the replacement cost, and there's the actual cash value, which sometimes you'll see that noted as RC replacement cost or ACV actual cash value. And what that means is that is how your claim or your loss is going to be settled. So in most cases, we want to make sure that folks have replacement cost on their policy, which means you have the amount of the claim, you minus out the deductible, and then that's what's dispersed out to the consumer to make the repairs or the replacement. Depending on the age of the home and the financials of the consumer, they may not want replacement cost. They may want just enough amount of money to get them off the springboard to go to their next venture. So you may want to have ACV on your policy, which is actual cash value. And again, that's how a claim or a loss is paid out. It's the amount of the loss, you minus out the deductible, and then they minus out the depreciation, and then that's what's dispersed out to the client to make the repairs or the replacement. So when you have ACV coverage, it is a lesser amount of coverage than replacement costs. So that's why it's less expensive to have ACV coverage versus your RC, which is replacement cost.
I feel like it's so important for consumers to understand the difference between those two items, because I think a lot of the time you may look at it and go, oh, actual cash, like that sounds pretty good, and it's a cheaper, payment, so I'm going to go that route, and people may not realize what it actually means.
Exactly, and that could make a huge difference when it comes to the settlement value of the claim.
And that's why it's so important to talk to your agent about this stuff. Well, this is all really, really good. Now that we've kind of covered all of the information that goes into this, I want to talk a little bit more on something you've already mentioned, right? You said it may not always be beneficial to file a claim. And so let's go a little bit deeper into that and talk about some of the ways that you would determine whether or not it makes sense to file a claim versus not filing a claim.
Yes, we always tell our clients, I want to be your first point of contact in the event of a loss. Now, let's make sure we're being smart humans here. If there's a fire, if there's a flood, call 911, make sure that you're safe. I don't need to be your first line of contact there.
You're not going to be able to respond and put that fire out for them.
No, but we want to be able to help you make a good decision on your insurance. Absolutely. So we want to be one of your first points of contact in the event of a loss. And the reason why is, one, we want to walk you through the steps. We don't want you to go through it alone. But two, we want to help you, again, there's my favorite word, be a good steward of your policy. Yeah. You could have a loss that is actually, once it's all looked at, could be under your deductible threshold. you don't want to make a claim against your policy if it's not going to pay out anyway. So if it's under your deductible threshold, you don't want to file the claim. And then there are some claims that, again, we talked about it earlier, it may sting a tiny bit, but if it's not going to financially devastate you, a lot of the times it's in your best interest to pay that claim out of pocket. And the reason we say that is the claims for your homeowners stay on your record for 60 months. So that's 5 years. So if you think about it, it is a long time. If you have a loss, that once that loss is paid out, your next 5 insurance cycles, it could have an effect on that premium, because depending on the type of loss, you could lose additional discounts. So if you're losing discounts and those accumulate over the next 5 cycles, it could actually be more than if you would have just paid that claim out of pocket. So that's why it's a good idea to have a very consultative approach with your agent so they can walk you through those things. And then a lot of carriers actually have preferred partners that they use, where you may be able to get discounts on services to make the repairs or the replacement. So again, a consultative approach to everything.
Absolutely.
And then on filing a claim, if it's something that it is very significant, we want to be able to walk that through you. We want you to know what to expect. We want you to know the steps. And we want you to know that we are here to be an advocate for you.
Those are all really great tips to kind of go through. And it really is an approach where you have to weigh the pros and cons to determine what is the best option for you in that moment. Well, Kayla, thank you so much for all of the information you have provided us with so far. I do want to dive in to a few of our frequently asked questions that we get all the time from consumers. And one of the things that we get often is people do not necessarily understand that the Oklahoma Insurance Department does not set the insurance rates. That's not something that we set. We simply regulate the companies. Can you talk a little bit about what the insurance companies go through? I know we've hit on this already a little bit, but kind of share some more on that.
Yes, I'm sure as much as he would like to have one, Commissioner Mulready does not have a wand. He does not get to grant insurance rates for Oklahoma. So it's actually based on each carrier. It's based on their financial stability. It's based on the amount of claims that they've paid out. So your historical data, it's based on their forecast of what they predict, the amount of business that they're going to bring on the books, so the new amount of risk that they're consuming. So the prices for each carrier are actually set by the carrier themselves. Then they do have to file with the state, so the rates are on record and they know what's happening. But we want to make sure that these carriers are able to maintain a financial stability, so make sure they can charge that premium, because we want them to be able to stay in the state. Again, I know these premiums are really high and it's putting a burden on Oklahoma right now, but I truly believe that we want to have 50 carriers in the state relative to 2. Because the competitive nature of it, we're going to get better pricing on your premium if you have 50 people fighting for your business relative to 2 people fighting for your business.
That makes perfect sense. Another question that we get often is, can my insurance company raise the amount of my homeowner's policy without my permission?
Yes. So one of the great things that came out of COVID is the home prices in Oklahoma went up drastically, which that's fabulous, because now if you go to sell it, it's worth more value. But it's also, yes, it's also more expensive to replace that or repair things on the home should there be a loss now. So it is actually written into your policy, and with different companies, there's different language, but this sums it all up. They are able to raise the dwelling amount of your home to make sure that it stays at the level of, if something happened and they had to repair or replace it, it is at the replacement cost today. And one thing that I want to touch on is this. Sometimes this is a pain point with consumers, especially if they are buying older homes. Right. They don't understand the difference between market value and replacement value.
Absolutely.
So market value is the value of the home at this point in time, and it's set by the market, which means what a consumer is willing to pay is the market value. Whereas the replacement cost is what it would cost for us to replace that home in today's prices. So if you have a home that's 70 years old, the market value for that home may be a little bit different than if you were buying a brand new home. Well, when they
So
go
I'm
to
going to throw
get
my house in as an example. My home was built in 1910. So you're saying that might be a little different than one that was built in 2010.
see, and exactly. And so the market value when you went to get an insurance quote, so just say you paid $200,000 for that home.
Sure.
Well, you go to get an insurance quote and they're like, well, the replacement value, again, raw numbers, is 300,000. And you're like, no. This home is
Right.
worth 200,000.
Right.
Well, that's the market value of the home. If that home burned to the ground today and you wanted to replace it with the exact same home, we have to make sure that we are providing the replacement cost so the insurance company can replace that home in today's values.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Well, the last question I've got for you, and again, we've kind of touched on this a little bit already, but is there anything I can do to lower the premium of my homeowner's policy? And again, I know we've gone into that a little bit, but just share a few more tips with us.
Yes, that is the topic of most of our conversations with clients today. Yes, just to start at the top, the biggest move of the needle on the premium is going to be your deductible. That again is the amount of financial responsibility you as the consumer are taking on in the event of the loss. So the higher the deductible, the more financial responsibility you are taking on. So the more that mitigates the decrease in the premium. The other thing that you can do, look at bundling as many things as you can with that same carrier to provide multiple discounts. And then again, my second favorite word, a consultative approach. Just make sure you're having a thorough conversation with your agent to make sure that the coverages that are on the policy are coverages that you need at this time.
Perfect. Well, thank you for going and answering all of those questions for us. I know our consumers at home are really appreciative to kind of get some more insights on that. And so, one of the last things that I just want to leave everyone with is that as the Oklahoma Insurance Department, we are here for you, the consumer. And there are so many ways that you can get in contact with us if you have questions or concerns or need help. You can give us a call. You can visit our website. We have tons of educational tools and resources. And you can also follow us on social media. That's a great way to hear about hot topics in the industry right now and just stay informed. And lastly, you can subscribe to our OID news by going to www.oid.ok.gov/subscribe. That's going to put you on our email list, and you're going to get a lot of really great information regarding insurance information in Oklahoma. And Kayla, I did want to offer, is there a way that people could get into contact with you should they have questions and want to reach out?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. Yes, you can go to our website. It's www.317insuranceadvisors.com. There's multiple ways that you can contact us through our website.
Wonderful. Well, Kayla, thank you again so much for being part of our Consumer Connection webinar today. It has been a real pleasure having you on board.
Thank you.